Well, there you have it, our top focus right here. Big blow to social media giant Facebook right after a 6-hour blackout. Facebook, WhatsApp and Instagram is currently back in action again. In fact, the global outage affected over 10 million people. Here's really what happened.
The big three of the social media and messaging: WhatsApp, Facebook and Instagram in blackout. Users unable to share posts and send messages. Hours of global fretting, outrage and meltdown. Users venting their ire, frustration in every possible platform. The global outage that lasted over 6 hours affected millions worldwide. Down Detector, a portal that tracks outages, claimed it was one of the largest ever snags ever seen. It went dark for many global users around 9:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time on Monday, and services were back around 3:30 a.m. on Tuesday. The last time Facebook had a disruption of this magnitude was in 2019, when services were down for over 10 hours. Facebook, WhatsApp and Instagram were all forced to take to Twitter to announce the massive outage, but did not mention the cause. Online network experts, however, speculate that it may involve an error with DNS, or the domain name system, for Facebook sites, which acts like an address book for users. Facebook boss Mark Zuckerberg announced that services were back in a post, where he apologized for the disruptions. Facebook, which is the second largest digital advertising platform in the world, lost about $5.45 lakh in US ad revenue per hour during the outage. According to Bloomberg, Mark Zuckerberg's personal wealth fell by more than $7 billion in hours, knocking him down a notch on the list of the world's richest people. Facebook shares fell nearly 5% on Monday, their biggest daily drop since November. Reports also suggest that according to several anonymous Facebook employees, the outage was caused by an internal routing mistake. But Facebook has not officially commented on this. The disruption comes a day after a former Facebook employee leaked documents alleging that the company prioritized growth over safety. Bureau Report, India Today.
All right, this surely has come as a big blow for Facebook, which owns all the three apps, Facebook along with WhatsApp and Instagram. Let me cut across to our panelists here. Ayush Ailavadi, technology editor and presenter with Business Today, joining us. We also have Jitin Jain, who's a cybersecurity expert. Ayush, over to you first. Here's, of course, Facebook, Insta and WhatsApp. Little did we know that our lives depended so much on these apps until it actually went out black. Did all of them realize that our life itself, your entire functioning depends on these apps, particularly WhatsApp? You had people rushing to Twitter, venting out their anger, and yet Facebook hasn't really given out a legit explanation. It's speculated to be an internal failure, a routing failure. Do take us through what exactly happened.
Nabila, you're right. You know, this is certainly shown us how reliant we are on these apps. I personally was on a flight back from a shoot, and none of my communications were going through with the team. But I'll tell you why this becomes more significant. It's the timing of it. The technical bits, I'm going to hand it over soon to Sandeep, perhaps to explain some of those reasons and the rationale behind something like this. But the timing of this becomes very interesting. We know there was that interview, that explosive whistleblower interview with Frances Haugens, and she spoke about how Facebook necessarily isn't prioritizing customer safety and privacy. And essentially, the way the algorithm operates is to spread misinformation and polarizing information so that you create more engagement, and hence more advertiser money comes in. Some huge allegations by the whistleblower, and now she's going to be testifying in front of the US Congress. And then this sort of an outage, when there's all sorts of theories on social media about why the two might be linked. But if we actually look at it, and you look at what Mark Zuckerberg, with some of the developments you mentioned as well in terms of net worth and the share price being down, then this is a bad couple of days in the office for Mark Zuckerberg and team. And there's going to be a lot of damage control, because we've seen a lot of technical explanations from companies like Cloudflare about what really happened. Yes, there was most likely a DNS routing error, but for the technical bits, I'd like to hand it over to Sandeep. Sandeep, thanks so much for joining us. I want to start off just by asking you what the possible theories could be for something like this, because like Nabila mentioned, it's not entirely clear from Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram about what happened. Even Oculus, their VR vertical was hit by this. But is this just an internal routing mechanism issue? Could it be linked to perhaps other developments that happened in the week before as well?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, frankly speaking, anything is possible. This is a developing story, and all we have been informed is a configuration error. Now, just to give you some context of this conversation, Facebook operates one of the world's largest distributed networking systems or distributed infrastructure. They have got systems in place which are fault tolerant. They can take care massive amounts of load. So something like this is extremely improbable. In fact, we should go and think what else could be the reasons. Obviously, it could be sheer coincidence that the whistleblower matter is coming up, but I will also not rule out a different kind of a cyber breach or an attack which force them to kind of take the systems down so that they can remediate and figure out the problems. Again, these are just speculations, so very difficult to kind of forecast anything until they actually see some data. But I need to tell you, how does the whole internet work and how basically things move around, right? So let us go back to the whole post office concept, right? If you sent me an letter probably many, many years back, what will happen is it will go to the post office. From the post office, it will go to the main post office in that particular city or the state. And from there, the routing happens, right? And the routing could happen through railway networks, through flight networks and all of that. So this is how the internet works in terms of BGP routers or those systems, border gateway protocols. They handle massive amounts of data and they tell who should go where. Now, obviously, DNS is another concept where the domain name, the addressing works that way. But to put it in very simple terms, BGP going down is not common. The systems are built in such a way. BGP going down has happened in the past. I think it has happened in 2008 when a Pakistani network kind of saw some situation. Then we have also seen by a Turkish network happening, but these have been more than 15 years back kind of episodes that we have seen, right? So I must tell you that at this point in time, while we should closely observe and watch, we really need to listen to Facebook and see what happened to the networks. But the explanation of configuration going down, while very much possible, is extremely improbable.
All right, Sandeep, and that's a very interesting point you bring up over there, because if this is a DNS issue, now if you could just break it down for us in terms of what DNS is like. I know the from a cybersecurity perspective and from a tech perspective, people really talk about it like a phone number and taking that phone number out of an address book. I think that's one way to explain it. But this BGP bit as well, because there's a lot of blogs that are talking about it. If you could just break it down for our viewers, what that really means in terms of a tech company relying on these sort of systems and processes and how things could have gone wrong or awry in that space.
Well, I think DNS, domain name system, is a simple way of addressing. It is very similar to how our own office addresses or home addresses work, right? So we have an apartment or an area, then we go down to an apartment or a block number, and then we go down to a door number, a house number, and things like that, right? So essentially, if I were to be talking to you the way I'm talking to you right now remotely, it's that my DNS is connecting through a different system and reaching out to your IP address. And these are all obfuscated or kind of abstracted so that when we type google.com or facebook.com or astak.com, we know that exactly it is pointing to an address, which is pointing in turn to a different infrastructure, which is pointing it back to me. Now, DNS name servers, DNS poisoning or DNS going down is possible for a variety of reasons, but internet just not works on DNS. It also works on the underlying infrastructure. The routing infrastructure is called the BGP infrastructure. So it's a combination of DNS and BGP. But again, I would say these are just speculation at this point in time. But the way I explained the post office example, exactly similar is how this works. If you have to send me a letter, you need to type down the address. That is the digital equivalent of a DNS address, right? And then it resolves using, again, a bunch of other mechanisms of how this will actually reach me. So while you are sending me a letter, you are writing down the address and pushing it back to me, but the underlying transport of how it all works boils down to how the BGP protocols and a bunch of other things work in terms of how it moves from your locality to the nearest post office, to the GPO, and then it moves through various transport networks, be it flight or railways
Absolutely,
or
Sandeep.
whatever.
No, you
Right.
explained that really well. We also have Jitin over here, and I'd love to bring in Jitin as well. Jitin, from the cybersecurity perspective, because this seems to be something that all cybersecurity experts have been speaking about for the past 12 hours. Is this purely a cybersecurity shortcoming that we are seeing at Facebook?
I think more than cyber security, it is an issue of internal processes and maybe a issue with a disaster recovery or backup mechanism. You see, yesterday when Facebook and WhatsApp went down, so there were three things which were very, very important and which stood out from previous incidents. One, it was not one service which went down; it was all Facebook platforms which went down. So it was not just WhatsApp or Instagram or Facebook alone. Even Oculus, their internal offices, which required ID authentication in the Facebook data centers, they stopped working. So that means that there was a issue with the complete Facebook umbrella platforms. Second, then there are conspiracy theories that is the Facebook being hacked or are they facing some sort of DDoS attacks? Both of them were unlikely because if they were facing cyber issues like hacking or something, then one of the platforms will not go down, but not all, and especially not the offices and the ID card authenticators. So that means it was not a hacking or something like that. And if it comes to DDoS attacks, you see platforms like Facebook have enough mechanisms like Cloudflare or protections in place.
Yeah.
And it's very, very difficult to take down a platform like Facebook by using a simple DDoS attack. And if it would have happened, that would have been figured out by the people anyways in the past, because ISPs would have
Absolutely.
reported, other platforms would have reported. None of the platforms reported anything, so issue was internally with Facebook. Third, it has happened in the
Right.
past where several prominent news websites like New York Times, BBC stopped working because
Right.
their CDN service provider like Akamai, they went down. Here, Akamai
All right.
did not report anything which Facebook uses. And third, you see, then it appears either it was a network configuration issue or it was an
Right.
internal sabotage. And Facebook,
No, interesting.
for long was not able to figure out what the problem was. Otherwise, they would have
You're right.
informed of the expected resolution time. And because of pandemic, their data centers are not properly staffed. Their ID cards were not functioning. So it is like Facebook
You're
just
right.
locked their car key inside and they just walked away. So
No,
I think,
Jitin,
the
that's
question
an
we should
interesting
ask-
example. It's
question
like
we should
it's like
ask, is it a misconfiguration or an internal sabotage?
that's
That's
what we should that's what we should focus on. And I think, Nabila, that's an interesting question, right? Is it an internal sabotage? I mean, obviously this is a bit of speculation at this point because Facebook's not been as transparent and clear, and it takes multiple Senate and congressional hearings for them to actually come out with some sort of transparency. But our experts have laid it out really well for us, and that's the question we should be asking. Is it an internal sabotage, or is it some sort of genuine issue when it comes to their systems?
Well, sure enough, the details that we get so far is still very sketchy. There's not a certain answer that the Facebook giant has yet given on why exactly the outage happened. But here's all that you really need to know about Facebook's blackout. In fact, it's the biggest outage in terms of numbers. The disruption there, all in all, lasted for about 6 hours. And the outage approximately hit at around 9:30 p.m. Indian time on Monday, and services were back up at around 3:30 a.m. IST. Now, the number of users, when we speak of the magnitude of this outage, the number of users in terms of numbers, it's affected over 3.5 billion worldwide users. And that's a huge number. It's impacted quite a lot of people there. And we're looking at shares when it comes down to the kind of impact it's had on Facebook shares. Well, here we're seeing at least 4.9% shares dropping of Facebook in just that 6 hours alone. The loss to Facebook entirely, we're looking at $545,000 per hour. That's the kind of impact it's had in terms of losses. We're looking at ad revenue specifically where they've lost out on. Now, let me take you through Facebook, which has lost big bucks courtesy this outrage. We're looking at big billions that they've lost so far. Just to give you a perspective on how much Facebook has lost, here's all that you need to know. In fact, for the numbers, speaking of the numbers here, we're looking at $540,000 per hour in terms of ad revenue that Facebook has lost so far. And then we're also looking at the losses where in the United States specifically and the kind of revenue that Facebook has lost out on. Here we're looking at Facebook's losses coming up to, for Mark Zuckerberg particularly, his own personal wealth has also fallen down due to Facebook's outage. Over $7 billion lost in just a few hours. We're looking at $7 billion that was lost in just that 6 hours' time. In fact, this eventually forced Zuckerberg to drop from the 4th to the 5th richest in Bloomberg Billionaire Index. That's a massive drop for Mark Zuckerberg. He's dropped below Bill Gates now on the Billionaire Index. So it's a big blow for Facebook as a social media giant, as a company, and of course, even personally, Mark Zuckerberg drops down to 5th in the richest man index.
Nabila, you mentioned some of those interesting stats, and I'm sure the Business Today team will be sitting down and cracking down those numbers in terms of the impact and the financial impact this has had on the founders and, of course, the stock as well. But obviously, I think those are things which will bounce back. What we can't really bounce back from is the timing of it all, like I said, and some of the things our experts mentioned, which is what we can't escape from at the end of the day, because this is what the social media universe is talking about, which is that this is quite possibly some sort of internal issue. So that this comes back to Facebook really sorting out and clarifying what the issue is, because this happened, things have happened at Facebook in 2018 and earlier, and we've covered that before. And we've seen how they've not been very transparent. Even when there have been data breaches, the sorry has come too late. And I think these are issues which Mark Zuckerberg will have to sit back on the round table and assess to see what really went wrong. And how do we sort this out going forward? Because we look at that congressional testimony coming up today, and that's going to be really Pandora's box based on the interview we saw over the weekend.
Well, let me give you a glimpse of the kind of blow this has had personally to Mark Zuckerberg. Of course, sorry has come too late. Undoubtedly, Mark Zuckerberg's rich man index, in that index of billionaires, he's dropped one position. Let me give you a quick glimpse into that. Mark Zuckerberg's place has dropped in the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. Elon Musk, in fact, Elon Musk is currently on top with $211 billion. And then comes Jeff Bezos, who stands at $186 billion. And then you have Bernard Arnault, who stands number 3 at $153 billion. And then you have Bill Gates. Well, this was the place where Mark Zuckerberg ideally stood at 4th place. Zuckerberg now, before he slipped to 5th, in fact, he lost millions, forcing Bill Gates now to take that spot. Mark Zuckerberg eventually now at 5th position. His net worth currently stands at $122 billion. Well, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram outage really meant one thing, that Twitter was eventually the boss. People eventually flocked to Twitter to vent out their anger over the outage and, of course, flooding the microblogging site with a lot of memes. Let's take you through what panned out.
Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, all on the blink. Globally, millions of users left high and dry. Users, many of whom use the Facebook platforms compulsively, deprived for hours, unable to post, share and connect. As Facebook saw its moments of meltdown, rival Twitter had a field day. The blackout spelling a big bonus for the microblogging giant. While many users took the opportunity to vent their ire on Twitter, memes flooding the site were the true winners, trolling the loss of face for Facebook. Many of the tweets were too real, too relatable for hassled Facebook, Insta and WhatsApp users. Twitter soon joined in to lead Facebook trolling. Soon after, tweeting, "Hello literally everyone," indicating Facebook users are using Twitter. The tweet did get a response from Instagram and WhatsApp, but not for hours. But many pointed out the irony of Facebook taking to Twitter to announce that their services were down. Twitter boss Jack Dorsey poked fun at Facebook. He replied to a viral meme that said Facebook.com was for sale, asking how much. Twitter even asked McDonald's to get 59.6 million nuggets for its friends, referring to Facebook users using its platform. Global outage of Facebook services was also a reminder for users who continue to promote safe and more private portals of communication. Whistleblower Edward Snowden took the opportunity to plug in Signal, the private messaging app. He said Facebook-owned WhatsApp being down is a reminder that you and your friends should probably be using a more private, non-profit alternative like Signal app. Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp were down for nearly 6 hours in what is being dubbed as one of the biggest ever snags in recent times, before being up and running once again. Bureau Report, India Today.